Good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Rishi Harinan and this is the C News Live Report at noon.
And I'm Nasira Mohammed with sport.
Topping the news at this time, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley is under the gun for statements made at a public meeting last night about victims of domestic violence. Dr. Rowley said at least 1 in 3 murders committed in recent time is related to domestic violence and said protection orders have been put in place to deal with this. However, that has caused some concern.
1/3 of the murders in recent times are domestic violence or domestic issues. And then that you call on the Prime Minister to do something about crime. I'm not in your bedroom, I'm not in your choice of men. You have a responsibility to determine who you associate with and know when to get out, and the state will try to help.
Now, Opposition Senator Khadija Amin took to Facebook this morning and said the statement was a devaluing act, and in the Prime Minister's words, he discounted the abusive maltreatment against women, making them responsible for the horrors being committed against them. Meanwhile, the Single Fathers Association has also expressed its surprise by the statement made by the Prime Minister. The group's president, Rondell Fields, said domestic crime is a direct result of people suffering from a lack of emotional intelligence. He said people who have lost their way emotionally find it a lot harder to make intelligent decisions. He said one does not need to get into people's bedroom, but create a space or avenue for them to get out what is hidden in their bedrooms. And advocacy group Fixing TNT says the statement by Dr. Rowley is insensitive to women's issues and places blame squarely on the victims. The group says this is why the Prime Minister has failed to remove Dr. Rolf Balgobin from his post at Angostura Limited, despite several allegations of sexual misconduct being leveled against him. Womantra has also spoken out against the statements, saying when they called for the resignation of former Port of Spain Mayor Raymond Timke, this nation sent a clear message that blaming women for attacks on their person was unacceptable, especially when this dangerous practice of victim blaming was perpetuated by holders of public office, whose responsibility it was to protect the interests of citizens, including women and girls. It said women are not killed because they have bad choices in men. Women are killed because their lives are not valued as much as male aggression and the ownership of female bodies. Womantra said it's waiting for the Prime Minister to respond. Now, the Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi did not believe the Prime Minister's statement was crass, but that it was edited in the media. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley was speaking on his conversations with the people in Maloney last night.
No, I don't think it was crass at all, because it was said in the context of the explanation. We in public life are quite accustomed to 10-second bites. The media gives you maximum 20 seconds of news coverage, and you certainly can't put the background behind it. So if you've taken his statements in 20 seconds of clippage, and that's the way that you portrayed, well, then he's open to criticism.
The Attorney General also believed the comment was taken out of context and said the Prime Minister was addressing the issue of domestic violence on the whole.
How does a government go into the physical relationship between persons when there's a protection order, when the police are involved, when the social and probation officers are involved, when the entire family knows of the situation and then the murder is committed? I think he was speaking to the boundaries and practicalities.
President of the International Women's Resource Network, Sandrine Rattan, is calling on men to find other ways to resolve issues and not use violence. She said her organization has been working with men and the issues facing them were frightening.
We can only do so much in terms of those issues. I would say like about 60% of the issues have been with them from their very early years. So now in their 40s or late 30s and going forward, it's a bit difficult to change, but it takes time. But at the end of the day, all I'm asking in this short space of time is to find another way.
Ms. Rattan also said women need to play their part as a relationship goes both ways.
Things to work, there needs to be collective conscience, there needs to be collective organization, there needs to be collective thinking, there needs to be compromise.
To some other news now. Kenny Ramroop, the 31-year-old man charged with the murder of Nadia Simms, is to reappear in court on March 7th. He appeared before a superior magistrate charged with murdering Nadia Simms sometime between January 27th and February 2nd. The Duty Council expressed concern for his safety in prison because she said he was a state witness in a capital matter. She also said he was on medication for a kidney problem. The magistrate made a note on the remand warrant for the Commissioner of Prisons. A request was also made for his family to visit him at the police station, but that was rejected by the prosecutor. The decomposing body of 26-year-old Nadia Simms was found last week, 4 days after she was reported missing. Some other news now, and Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says crime seems to be a way of life in this country and this must be addressed. He says the education sector may not be doing as well as it should because after a primary school education, many children are put into a secondary system where they are not ready.
Possibly 25 or 30% of them unprepared for secondary school. They go into the secondary school system, and between Form 1 and age 16, a series of transformations that are negative take place. And by the time a significant number of our young people come out of the secondary school system, they would have passed through the schools, and the system needs to be examined to determine whether what we are doing is giving us the outcome that we expected.
The Prime Minister was speaking during last evening's conversations with the people in Maloney. You're watching the C News Live report at noon. Remember, you can keep up to date with all the latest news on our website at ctvtt.com, or you can check out our Facebook and Twitter pages at C News Live. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says he has to remain quiet when it comes to policing in this country because it's not his job to tell the officers what to do. It's the job of the police commissioner. Speaking during the first conversation with the people in the Aruca-Maloney constituency last night, Dr. Rowley said it is for the top cop to take control of the service, especially since Parliament has given him the power to discipline the officers and wean out the corrupted ones.
Like you, I too am watching with anger at some of the things I'm seeing, and I dare not open my mouth, especially since I'm Prime Minister, because you could say it and it goes unnoticed. But if I say it, it's for headline news. And the last thing we want to do is to do anything to further demoralize the police service. On the contrary, we do everything we can to bolster and to give them the support to go out there. He said Trinidad and Tobago will not lose the fight against the criminal elements. As it stands, there are about 6,000 full-time police officers and 2,000 special reserved officers. According to Dr. Rowley, this is above the world average based on the amount of citizens in the country. It is not that we have not been providing resources to the police service. It is not that we have not provided human resources or financial resources. It is just that there are a whole series of tangled systems which are guaranteed not to give you the result that you are looking for. And what we have been doing is trying to untangle those arrangements, and we have started to do that by putting in place this manpower audit of the police service. Prime Minister Dr. Rowley also said police officers can become overwhelmed when dealing with crime. If you have a certain amount of policemen in the homicide department, in the police service, as we do, we have a homicide department, and you have 4 murders for the weekend, and you deploy the homicide officers to pursue investigations on those 4 murders. Before they begin to wet their feet in the investigation, you have 4 more. And then the following weekend, you have another 4. You know what you're heading to? You quickly come to a situation where the police, with the best will in the world, is overwhelmed by the size of the assignment. Meanwhile, he said there will be no state of emergency in this country. He said January has normally been a month which has seen over 40 murders in recent time. In 2012, there were 48, just 4 more as compared to 2017. The Center for Justice says with the detection rate of crime being at an all-time low, government should look at officers or giving officers incentives to motivate them to work harder.
And therefore an incentive for police promotion should be based on detection, police, and a cash incentive in respect to detection. But our major problem is what's causing a trickle-along crime that leads now to murder are 2 things: the corruption that is eating the heart of this nation and the drug situation.
Security expert Paul Daniel Nahu says one of the problems facing the police service is manpower, and recruiting new officers isn't very easy.
Due to background checks coming back bad, due to a simple thing like they drug test you and they find drugs in your system. I mean, with young males, it's an epidemic in terms of the amount of marijuana smoking, all the tattooing down head to toe, because, you know, if you have tattoos, you can't be shown in uniform, and the background checks, a lot of them in communities are aligned with unsavory characters,
He also warned against the wholesale absorption of special reserved police officers in the system.
Especially with all the SOPs who have been arrested due to a fault in the background checks in recent years. You're going to introduce more corruption to the service if you don't do it carefully. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but they have to be very careful about how they implement that and how they absorb it. The problem isn't absorbing them into the police service, but it's how you absorb them.
Opposition MP Dr. Suraj Rambachan says the Prime Minister's conversation with the people is a public relations gimmick rather than a serious attempt to listen and understand the plight of the people. He said the same promises and language which for 18 months have dominated the spoken words of the Prime Minister were again regurgitated last evening to the point of nausea. Dr. Rambachan said it was clear that the Prime Minister and his ministers have run out of ideas and are now using this forum to try and placate the people who are frustrated, growing angrier by the day, living in fear, and are seeing the country descend into a level of lawlessness not experienced before. The National Solidarity Assembly is joining the call for an extraordinary sitting of Parliament to discuss the crime situation. However, it said it must be a sitting with a difference in that it must not be an adversarial debate to score political points as much as it must be a discussion among parliamentarians, the people's representatives, about the best way to deal with the escalating and almost out-of-control crime situation. The party's leader, Nirvan Maraj, says it must not be where the opposition opposes for opposing sake or the government imposes for imposing sake. The NSA says it must be a coming together of ideas in full view of the public's view who would have elected these members to office. Now for a look at the weather forecast.
The Eastern Caribbean remains under the ridge of high pressure with fresh to strong breezes coming through. A few blustery showers are also likely, especially across the hills. But otherwise, we can expect partly sunny skies and a pleasant day of 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. If you're heading offshore, the Met Service advises all marine interests to exercise extreme caution with choppy to rough seas up to 3 meters, easterly swells of 10 seconds, and fresh to locally strong winds of 20 knots, rippling the seas further out in the Atlantic. High tide at 1 p.m., then low tide at 8 p.m. That is your latest weather, and I am meteorologist Ian Wallace.
The National Primary Schools Principals Association is alarmed and deeply concerned about the escalating incidents of crime and criminality in the nation. The group issued a release which says, "We strongly condemn any and all acts of violence, crime and other forms of lawlessness in the society and in our schools." The release further stated that NAPSPA is cognizant of the fact of principals is providing for safety and security for our staff and students, and we know our members will continue to work this in the fore as they discharge their duties. The body says incidents like these tell of a greater tragedy which plague our nation as children are mirroring our society. NAPSPA says violence has reached unacceptable levels, which something must be addressed. The Attorney General has once again said there are many issues faced when it comes to implementing the death penalty, one of which is the length of time the matter takes in the court. Responding to public concern about this, AG Faris Al-Rawi said there are 33 people who have been sentenced to death. Now, because of the length of time the matter took before the court, 11 have been given a life sentence.
Of the 33 people, 11 people in the government already passed 5 years and cannot hang. That leaves us with the remainder of people. The important question now as a country is, how long does it take the process between High Court, Court of Appeal, Privy Council, Inter-American Court?
In some cases can take more than 15 years. In 2009, it took 7 months for someone to be hung. However, according to the AG, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution had its full complement of workers and not a 76% vacancy.
We urge the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, the only body at law that can hire lawyers to the DPP's office in permanent position is the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, and I'm very pleased to say that the Chief Justice has confirmed to me that 33 new lawyers go into the DPP's office.
The Minister of National Security, Edmund Dillon, says laws to amend the speed limit will soon be taken to Parliament. This is among the measures being used to deal with road traffic accidents.
Right now, based on the police service request, we, the government, stands prepared to ensure that there's additional speed guns brought in and additional legislation to treat with the issues of speed. And in a short while, you would see legislation coming to amend the speed limit in Trinidad and Tobago.
Legislative changes are needed to improve the fishing industry, and this is the plan of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. Minister Clarence Rambarat says an interministerial committee is working to address some of the concerns raised by the United Nations when it comes to improving fish landing sites. As it relates to the Guayagüeyari site, he said in 2012 a new structure was commissioned at a cost of $62 million, but according to the minister, up to now, they have not got any fish.
We've done some work in the last fiscal year. As you know, that is my community. We've done some work on the old fishing site to make it far more usable than it was in terms of lighting and sanitation facilities and the things that the people need to use it at this time, while we work on making the Guayagüeyari fishing facility a facility that the fishermen could actually use.
To some other news now, Sports Art and Republic Bank Exodus will appear first in each of their categories when the Pan-Trinbago NLCB National Panorama semi-finals get on the way on Sunday, 12th February 2017 at the Queen's Park Savannah in Port of Spain from 9 a.m. 28 steel orchestras in the medium and large bands categories will join 30 small bands in the Savannah party for places in the grand finals. The draw for playing positions for the medium and large bands took place earlier this morning at CTV. The draw will be aired just after 1 o'clock. Now we have sports, so from exciting pan to exciting cricket. Nasira Mohammed, what can we expect?
Certainly, Rishi, and Red Force picked up a victory last night against the Windward Island Volcanoes and all but secured a fine spot in the semi-finals. The Trinidad and Tobago Cycling Federation held its third race of the Road Cycling Series this past weekend. Race 3 started at the Brian Lara Stadium in Tarouba before the cyclists headed south before making their way along the Sir Solomon Hojoy Highway to the Nestle roundabout, before heading east to end on the Arima Bypass Road. And it was Heatwave's Jabari Whiteman who was the overall winner, while he also copped the junior category. Ironically, second and third Enrique de Comarond and Lorenzo Orozco are also junior riders from Heatwave and Team DPS respectively. Among the ladies, Christiane Farav of Breakaway took the top prize ahead of Jessica Costa of Heatwave. And among the masters, Rafael Figueroa of Breakaway was the winner in the 40 to 49 category. Michael Brown of Christian Wheelers took the 50 to 59 age group category, and Robert Farrell of Southampton took the 60 to 69 category. And that was the sport for today.
The news report at noon. I'm Rishi Harinanan.
And I'm Nasira Mohammed.
Remember, for up-to-date and breaking news throughout the day, you can visit the C News Live website at ctvtt.com. Have a good afternoon.